I've been practicing breath work every single day for 100 days for at least 7 minutes a day. And today I'm on day 100, but by the time this video goes out, it might be more. But essentially, the beginning of the year, I challenged my breathwork community to do 77 flow, where we practice 7 minutes of breathwork every single day for 77 days. And the challenge was to really get us in our own practice. I train breathwork facilitators, and I'm always on their ass about it. Don't be a breathwork facilitator who doesn't practice breathwork yourself. You got to embody the work. You got to do the work for yourself. I'm always on my high horse about that. So we're like, all right, in 2025, the beginning of the year, everybody's setting all these challenges for themselves that are really about like weight loss and, forcing yourself and doing it and going like hard and harsh in the dead of winter. We want it to be a little bit more easeful. Like, what does it mean for us to be in flow? So I wanted to share with you my reflections of what it felt like to do this practice for 100 days and what I'm going to do differently going forward in the next 100 days.
An editing comment is that I was fasting for Ramadan for a portion of this, so my experience is definitely influenced by that.
The first thing I noticed is how tender I was becoming. And by tender, I mean just like more vulnerable, more like sensitive to touch, and not necessarily in a negative way where I was like, oh, everything's like hurting me, everything's like that, this and that. But I was just like feeling things just a lot more deeper, where my heart was opening up. I was also feeling sadness a lot deeper. I was feeling grief a lot deeper. I was feeling anger a lot deeper. All my emotions just became like more magnified and deeper. So it was kind of annoying a little bit because it's like, oh, I'm not trying to feel all of this right now. I was just trying to do 7 minutes of breath work, But things were coming up to the surface. And something that I always mention that is the difference between breathing techniques and breath work is that breathing techniques are things that are meant to like regulate you in the present moment, like a breath in, a breath out, or a box breath, or a 6, 7, 8 breath. Those are like temporary, momentary regulation tools. Whereas breath work is very much about activating your sympathetic nervous state so that you get to an activation point. So 7 minutes is not long enough for you to get into a full activation, but it's kind of at like that edge where you experiencing a little bit of that activation, but not totally fully in it. So what happened for me as I'm going through this 77 days, and as I mentioned, I'm on day 100 right now. As I'm going through these 77 days, I'm feeling like my body just like open up more, like things that I didn't know that I was like still clenching in my stomach, especially in like my womb space. I noticed it in my lower back. I noticed it, and in my side body I noticed it. I started to notice like physical opening. Okay, so in this kind of tenderness, I also found that like my gratitude was a lot like deeper as well. And as part of my daily gratitude practice, even before I wake up, I try to feel into three things that I'm truly grateful for. Even if I feel like I'm not supposed to be grateful for it or it's like too materialistic or whatever, I just let go of that expectation. And whatever it is that I am actually fully grateful for, I try to feel into that feeling for as long as I can. Now, in this practice, when I'm feeling just like even more tender and vulnerable, I started to notice that like that gratitude also felt just deeper, where, oftentimes in gratitude practice, I cry or I feel just like the emotion a lot, but this time it was like every single time I was crying, I was just like feeling like deep pure gratitude in my bones and my body and my muscles and like every single part of my being, which I have felt before, but it was just beautiful to consistently feel it every single morning as I've been doing this 77 days of flow. Now, the second thing I want to mention is that right after actually like right around like week 3, I experienced an entire dip where it was just so difficult to do the practice. Week 1, I was like, yeah, let's go. Week 2, I'm like, yep, see, I'm being consistent, and then week 3, I noticed like I'm trying to actually avoid the practice. I'm like, waiting till the last minute, or I'm doing it late at night. I'm trying to kind of like run out of time. I'm like, maybe I skip a day or something like that. And then I'm like, oh shit, my community is doing with me, and I train these facilitators, and I got to lead by example. So a little bit of shame, brought me to be consistent every single day. But what I noticed and acknowledged is that dip was actually very important to recognize. So part of what happens when you do breath work in general is, I'll mention to you my 4R protocol, which is first, you raise emotions into the body. 2, you recognize what's coming up. 3, you release those emotions. And then 4, you have a regulated nervous system. So what I was experiencing in this like dip is this big burst of new emotions that were coming to the surface. So first it was through that tenderness, but then also I started to notice like surface things that I thought were like dealt with were under the surface, and they were coming back to the surface. And certain things like you're aware of, that's like, oh yeah, like I understand why it's coming, but there was all of this like kind of uncomfortable feelings. Some insecurities came up for me, certain things and certain old thoughts and old patterns. And then I was like, what the heck is in retrograde right now? And we're in eclipse season, all this like wild astrology was happening too. So I was trying to blame everything. But on a physiological level, I started to notice emotions that were, not necessarily being looked at every single day, were wanting attention. So because I was trying to avoid all of that, that's why I was like, okay, week 3, I started to feel that dip. Week 4 was really, really hard. But as soon as I acknowledged that, as soon as I recognized it, at first I didn't recognize it. I was like, oh, maybe I just feel lazy today, or maybe it's just today. But then it's like every day since then, you start to recognize it. And once I recognized and acknowledged it, it gave me a better possibility to approach these emotions and these insecurities, to be honest, with a smarter energy, instead of feeling like I'm gonna avoid it, or like I need to deal with everything immediately and feeling overwhelmed by it. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Let me converse with it. Let me ask it. Let me journal about it. Let me, put some like conversation and dialogue to it, instead of like making this my entire personality now, or like, trying to heal this insecurity or trying to heal this or that, like all of a sudden, when like sometimes, you can feel like activated to do that. So yes, the tenderness was true, and then that resistance was true. And something that you have to know about your nervous system is that anytime you're doing healing work, it's always going to expand and then it's going to contract. So that expansion that I just mentioned, at first, that gratitude, the tenderness, the emotions, and then all of a sudden, like immediately after, predictably, I experienced kind of this like shutdown, insular. And it's really interesting to notice too, because we were doing this as a community, where in our like little group chat situation, people were dropping in like, oh, I'm on day 1, or I'm in day 15, or I'm day 30, I'm day, whatever. A lot of us were on the same day as a group. So we were starting to notice like, oh my gosh, like a lot of us are actually falling out on week 3. A lot of us are experiencing this like constriction and pull back on week 3 and week 4. That was like a rough time for us, but good for data, like good for information. So after I came out of this dip, I experienced another contraction. I felt openness. I felt just like, whoo, like going through the dark and then going through the light, and then going through the light. So I came into this like lighter area. I don't know if I resolved or integrated everything that was happening in the dip, but I just had this like more openness to it, more belief in myself, more confidence in my emotions, more trust in my intuition. Just like, yeah, you know what? Like I feel really equipped to deal with the things that are coming up, because I'm not avoiding the things that want attention. I'm not avoiding it and suppressing and saying like, later, I'm going to do this later, I'm going to do this different, at a different time. I'm very much saying that like, whoa, I acknowledge it and I don't need to live in it. I can still like experience that expansion and experience kind of this like wide open emotional space without being stuck in the grief or the sadness, the insecurities, and many of the things that were coming up for me. So when I came into this expansion, what I started to notice, and this is roughly around week 5, week 6, and 77 days is about 11 weeks. So we're at week 5, week 6, kind of at the halfway mark. I started to notice how ritualistic that started to feel for me. So even in places where I was like not in my home, where I could like set up my area and like do my 7 minutes or whatever, I started to notice that I didn't like really need a space or like need a setup for that. I could do this in my car, I could do this in my house, I could do this in my bed, I could do this in my office, I could do this outside. I could kind of just pull onto this practice, and I could, really rely on this 7 minutes and give myself this 7 minutes without feeling like it needed to, have like a full hour to exist, and it didn't take away so much of my time and attention and energy. It actually was giving me more time, more attention, and more energy. So the ritual started to feel just more like integrated, where I didn't feel I needed to have things in order to practice it. When I started it, I didn't feel that way. But when I was experiencing my constriction, I was like, yeah, I don't have the right space, or I don't have the right, you know what I mean? I was like creating all these narratives. But as soon as I got into this next, openness, contraction space, it just became this like very ritualistic thing that I was doing for myself without making it like a thing. It was just like a day-to-day practice that I was feeling, as part of just my regular habit. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to drink water, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Like, it's natural that I'm in this practice. So something else that I want to reflect on in my 77 days is, right after I finished my 77 days, I was kind of like, okay, I don't have to do it anymore. But the thing that I just told you about, the fact that it started to feel ritualistic, that it just became this like habit that now it's like, oh, I feel weird if I didn't do that today. You know what I mean? So in our group chat, we were also talking about like, what's everybody feeling? Every week I was doing a check-in being like, hey, if you fell off the track, come back on, no shade, no shame, just jump back on the bandwagon. You could start this anytime, including you. There's YouTube videos on my channel that you can practice 7 minutes a day for every single day as long as you want to. But in our group chat, we started to notice like a very similar pattern. Like people who started, they were gung-ho, then they had the dip, then they had the openness, and then it just became this like ritualistic practice. Now, we also noticed that many people who went to the dip didn't come back. That's something to notice too, because your nervous system is also something that will constrict and say like, hey, are you sure you want to like open the Pandora's box? Do you want to feel the things that are really tender right now? And sometimes the choice is to say no. The choice is to say like, actually, I'm not going to do it. But when you build this like consistent practice, what it does is it gives you emotional resiliency. It gives you nervous system resiliency. So all the things, the insecurities that would have like put you out for weeks at a time, it just doesn't do that anymore. You're like, yep, okay, I acknowledge it. I see that it's here again. And how can I still continue to love myself and be compassionate with myself and take care of myself and just be present in the moment with myself? And that's kind of my last point, that breathwork in itself, like I train breathwork facilitators. So when they're learning breathwork, they're learning the full activation piece. They're learning the journey of a breathwork session, the anatomy of a breathwork, the soundscape, the music, the emotional components, the energy, the elements. There's so many different parts to that. But what I started to recognize is like, wow, I really stand by this practice. This has become so important for my own presence to stay in tune with myself, to be in tune with the things that I love to do in life, which is a lot of hobbies. I'm a DJ, I'm a producer, I've been dancing at the pole studio and going to twerk classes, and I just really love the way that I can show up for myself in my life and just feel alive, and it's so easy to be discouraged and disappointed and feel like you're supposed to be somewhere and be comparison and like feel like you're starting over all the time and every day is another Saturn return and another, astrological thing and this thing and that thing and every da. It's reminded me like how vital a breathwork practice is to stay present with yourself. That you can love and accept yourself exactly in this present moment, even if there's things that you're still working on, even if there's things that you're wanting to change or adapt, even if, right? Like all of those things can be true while simultaneously you're just bothering to give a shit about yourself. And I feel just so healthy in so many different ways, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, my skin, my face, my energy, my aura, my, attention, like all of these different things that are energy hygiene wise are just so much cleaner and clearer based on this 77 days of practice. Now, I feel like I already have really good energy hygiene and all of those things were like already true, but now it's just getting to the next level, next layer, like how grounded I can be for myself, how grounded I can be for other people, how supportive can I be for myself, how can I provide, the spaces and the offerings that I do for my community from a place of like, yeah, and what does it mean for me to, maintain this embodiment of my work, which I'm always preaching. I'm like, do not be a breathwork facilitator who does not do breathwork. Like, I can't trust you. And I've always been a breathwork facilitator who does breathwork. But to keep an everyday consistent practice like this has given me so much more vitality and life energy that I'm just like, where do I put it? You know, all of this vitality is just flowing through me. We call this 77 flow for a reason, because flow breathwork is movement, it's life, it's the up and down, it's the constriction and the contraction, it's the I'm open and then I'm closed. And how is it that you navigate that with full compassion and love to yourself? And I was so grateful to show up for myself in this practice in the way that I did. So friends, if you want to join 77 Flow, it's totally free. Basically, you're doing 77 days of breath work every single day. You could go onto my YouTube to find videos that are 7 minutes long. So short and sweet, nothing too long, nothing too short, just the right amount of time to build good habits and build good energy hygiene for yourself. And you can start anytime. So it doesn't have to be the new year or the equinox or the solstice or full moon, new moon, like it doesn't matter. You can do it anytime. All right? Well, friends, just remember, the world is your playground, and until next time, I will catch you soon.